If we start.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's starting now.
you're live.
There you
Hey.
go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to I Feel You Bro, Men Talk About Feelings. My name is Winston Zhang. I'm a writer and editor at Tech Nation Studios. And with me today are Adrian, co-founder and chief creative officer at Hepmil Media Group, perhaps better known to you guys as Xiaoming from SGAG. And also Chirag, Agarwal, co-founder and chief growth officer at Talk Your Heart Out, a Singapore-based online counseling platform. Gentlemen, could I get you guys to briefly introduce yourselves first? Adrian, we can start with you.
Yes. So like what Winston mentioned, I'm Adrian. Yeah, with my shades on, I'm Xiaoming, the guy who likes to crack lame jokes, play pranks. But don't worry, guys, we're not here today. It's not a stand-up comedy. We're here to talk about like our feelings, men about feelings. So I'm really excited about the session today. Yeah, because I think it's a topic that I kind of feel quite passionately of. Hey, Sabrina, hello. Yeah,
Shades
so
off.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, I would say that this is just a little short introduction. But over to you, Chirag.
Thanks, and thanks once again for having me here. My name is Chirag, the co-founder and chief growth officer at Talk Your Heart Out. As Winston mentioned, it's an online counseling platform, that I started with my wife a couple of years ago. So it is a topic close to my heart. I was in a previous life a diplomat, a public policy consultant, a government affairs consultant. So know a little bit about the corporate workplace and the conversations that happen there as well. But yeah, really looking forward to this discussion. And as Gillian said just now, just men talking about feelings.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so thank you so much, guys. And to everyone in the audience, please feel free to drop any questions that you have into the Q&A tab at any point, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the session. All right. Okay, so let's get right into the topic. Just as the context setting, traditional Asian culture and norms, they expect men to be strong, independent, we can't show weakness, that kind of thing. But of course, doing that all the time, suppressing all of that, bottling that all in is recipe for disaster, right? In 2021, according to a report by the ICA, the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority of Singapore, almost 7 in 10 of all suicides in this country were by men. And in another study, out of 11 masculine stereotypes tested amongst men, the need to maintain this image of self-reliance was weighed the heaviest. And this meant that men were 1.6 times more likely to have negative thoughts if they felt that they weren't living up to this expectation. So the big picture social implications are very clear. But at this point, to get into the topic itself, I'd like to ask you guys, why is talking about feelings, men expressing themselves, why is this topic important to you on a personal level? Chirag, we can start with you.
Yeah, and I think for us, for Shilpa and me, the realization really came when we moved back from Australia back in June 2019. This is pre-pandemic. And one of the reasons we decided to start Talk Your Heart Out was actually because we wanted to address the gap in terms of the access to mental health support that's available in Singapore. And that came from our own kind of reflecting on our own personal experience with dealing with stress, anxiety in school, high pressure work environments in our previous workplaces, and also at home, dealing with family and difficult relationship with parents and siblings. And the realization was more generally first that, the support that's available through the healthcare system in Australia and the conversations that were happening about mental health in Australia was so different compared to when we moved back home. But then more particularly around for me, what was really telling was as a man, like the things we spoke about in the workplace in Australia, for example, like I had a friend once came up to me and said, I'm taking a mental health day off, under a lot of pressure. I'm just going to go home, call in sick. And, can you help me just kind of cover for me? And that for me was such an eye-opening experience because here was another guy just walking up to me and just say, look, you know what, I've got too much on. I'm going to take the day off, telling the boss, can you please cover for me? And that kind of open conversation I had never heard in my working life in Singapore. So it was quite an eye opener living abroad to say that there actually can be a very different way we talk about mental health that even in this part of the world.
Okay. And Adrian, why is this important to you on a personal level?
I think for me, growing up, I've always been, I would say, someone who feels a lot. I mean, it kind of explains why I'm like in the creative industry. Yeah, I like to manifest in my feelings, really just kind of absorb them, right? But then I think, really outwardly showing this feeling, to the people around me has always been a struggle, right? Because like what you said, with Asian society is that, men shouldn't be showing too much feelings. We need to be in control. We need to, be calm, right? So I think that has always been a struggle, like growing up, right? So I think, for me to reach this point in my life, in my career, where I'm kind of like comfortable with sharing my feelings openly, sharing my problems like openly, I feel like this is something that, I would love to be able to kind of, gather thoughts, share insights, and just really continue to grow in this journey with other men. Yeah.
Yes, and that's what we're here for, right? To talk about all this and hopefully help other people, other men out there, to see that this is the kind of thing we should be talking about openly, just putting it deep inside. Okay, so I guess Adrian, you touched a little bit on that there, but like I wanted to ask you guys, right? From a young age, right? What were the kinds of things that shaped your idea or your ideal of what masculinity should look like, and how did that over the years affect the way that you coped with, hard times, bad feelings, and so on? Adrian, maybe you could elaborate on what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think growing up, I always thought, like, am I just like a weird emo kid, right? Who's always like, feeling extreme like emotions in me, but then, I don't really know how to express them properly as well. I think there was like this silent pressure from just, the environment, like the people around me, right, to not show the feeling, because, I'm a guy, right, I'm a man, right? I think that has resulted, kind of like me bearing and suppressing a lot of this, I would say emotions, maybe emotions that comes from problems, right, in me, which I think that wasn't like very good, right? I think that kind of shaped a lot of my personality, growing up. And I think that is also where I would say, that struggle kind of affected me when I was growing up. Yeah, I mean that resulted me in not being, I would say, someone who is very confident with myself and who I am. Yeah, I think eventually when, conversations like this starts happening, and, there are a lot of different, I would say, firms, shows who kind of really talk a little bit more about men and their feelings, then I realized, hey, maybe it's not all that bad, right? Maybe it is actually okay for me to embrace all the emotions and feelings that I have. Right. And I think that has allowed me to slowly be a little bit more comfortable with myself and not think that I'm just this weird emo kid who is having this irrational thoughts that's flowing through my mind and my body. Yeah, and I think, that has kind of led me to where I am today. Yeah, so I'm glad that, that I've been exposed. I mean, we're increasingly getting exposed to such conversations. I feel like, seeing other people talk about it, other men talk about it, gives me a little bit more confidence that, yes, first, I'm not the only one, and that, hey, there can actually be proper dialogue about it without like feeling like you are getting judged, right? People are critiquing you on some of these topics. But yeah,
Okay.
so that's been a little bit of my journey.
Yes, and Chirag, what about you? Like, what was it like as a child, as a young adult, and so on? Learning to do these things.
I think what Adrian just said really resonated with me as well about, I think growing up, I just didn't have people around me talk about their feelings, whether it's my brother, whether it's my friends, whether it's my parents, my father, my mother, like nobody really talked about how they felt. And so growing up, you didn't know there was this thing called feelings that you would talk about. So I think that's the first thing, right? You don't really even recognize that these are emotions, that you talk about it. And when you talk about it, you understand them better, and then you can deal with them. But there was just no conversation around it. Like your mother will ask you, are you hungry? Will never really ask you, how do you feel? It's still love, but the love is still all physical. There's no kind of emotional, like how you're feeling, that kind of thing. So that was one, just reflecting on what Adrian said. I think the other thing I always felt growing up was this need to be in control. And this is something my therapist kind of like enlightened me on, which is that, even in therapy session, I want it to be structured. I go in with a goal and I want to talk about what I want to talk about. I have a game plan. And she's like, you don't need to have a game plan coming into therapy. This is your space to really understand how you feel. But that's kind of how I was brought up, where if anyone ever asked me a question, it felt like I had to have all the answers or figure out all the answers on my own, that I needed to be in control. And because I think I grew up with one brother and no sisters, I never really saw it as a male-female thing. But I think when I spoke to my wife and got together with her and I kind of understood her childhood, I think part of it was kind of being a guy. There was just an expectation that, say if your parents are quibbling or fighting, that you are stepping in and being the adult. So, you grow up very quickly, I think, if you're a guy, and with, bypassing a lot of like kind of the emotions that you feel and kind of like taking care of yourself and even feeling okay not to know all the answers. I think that is kind of how I felt all the time, that I needed to know the answer.
Mm-hmm. I think that thing you mentioned there about needing to have a game plan, or like having this very objective focus kind of a way of looking at things, and that resonates very strongly with me, because like for me, when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of like difficulties like fitting into so-called society's ideal of what a man should look like or what a boy should look like. But as I grew older, became a young adult, started dealing with more complex feelings and so on. Similarly, I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could really talk to about these kinds of things. Like, yeah, mom and dad were like, are you hungry? Have you eaten? This kind of things. But it's not like, how do you feel? And there wasn't that space to learn how to recognize and identify these feelings. And also like, maybe it's just me, or maybe it's just the male friends had the time. But if you tell a male friend a problem, usually they'll come to you with a solution. Or they'll ask, have you tried this? Have you tried that? They don't just like, okay, let me listen to you, And sometimes that's just not what you need, right? Sometimes you just need a listening ear, right? So over time, like I kind of felt like I didn't really have anyone to talk to about these kinds of things. And it's not just men. Some of my female friends also were like, so have you tried this? Are you okay? Like there wasn't something that I needed there. And it just kind of like muddled my way through adolescence into adult, with that kind of like half answers to questions that I had about my emotions and so on. So growing up, you guys have talked about how's it like growing up. Having that kind of like suppression or like expectation ingrained in you from a young age, right? As you got older, right? How do you feel like that affected you or your relationships, like not being able to discuss feelings openly? Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is where I'll kind of just put on the hat of being a boss, right? Because I do kind of run quite a big team at Hepmil and at SCAG, with the whole idea of boss needing to always show that we're in control. I think that in itself, having run a team for more than 7 to 8 years, I kind of feel like my way of dealing with emotions, like as a boss, and showing those emotions as a boss has kind of changed, right? Because I think at the start I was really just going in with the idea of, hey, I need to be in control, I need to know what to do, right? I can't show too much weaknesses and like vulnerabilities, because I think when there's problems, right, the guys are looking at you for solutions, right? And if you look like you're weak, or you look like you don't know what you're doing, or that you are emotionally affected by the situation, then you might not get that respect from the guys. The guys might not get a clear direction of where we should head towards next, right? But I think over time, especially right before COVID, I mean right before lockdown during the COVID period, I think that was when my perception of as a boss, how do I really show emotions at the right time? I feel like that becomes like important, yeah, because I mean, the truth is that, in certain situations, we truly, even as bosses, right, struggle a little bit, right? We don't have all the answers to all the different problems in the world. And I think in a situation like COVID, where there's lockdown happening all over the world, right, we genuinely do not know what would happen to the world tomorrow, what will happen to the company tomorrow, what will happen to all my staff tomorrow, right? And I felt like at that point in time, it was important for me to kind of, show them exactly how troubled I was, right? How lost I was as well. That yes, I think we're gonna get through this together, but we're gonna do all we can. But I also want to tell you that I'm also affected by this emotionally, right? I'm also struggling to come to terms to what will happen tomorrow. And I feel like that was a major changing point in my, I would say, leadership journey when it comes to bosses and feelings, men talking about feelings. I feel like at that point in time, my guys needed to know that I was also feeling like how they're feeling, instead of trying to act like I got all the answers to all the problems that is on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's a newsflash to people, but bosses, leaders are humans as well. Also have feelings, also go through all these things, right?
Mm.
Chirag, how about you? Like, how do you think like emotionally suppressing yourself over the years affected you over or your relationships?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I just pick up on what you said earlier, Winston, which is that I think I learned the wrong lesson in how to deal with someone coming to you and talking about their feelings. So very early in my relationship with my wife in particular, every time she wanted to share her feelings with me, I would do what you just said. I'd give her a solution. I'm stressed at work, quit your job. And, I don't like this person, stop talking to them. And it was so impulsive and without realizing that I'm actually doing more harm than good. And again, it's out of love, right? You want to help that person, but you're totally learning the wrong lessons in that when someone shares their emotions with you or feelings with you, you have to understand their state of mind, and understand when is a good time. Are they really asking for advice or counsel here, or are they really just needing some support to know that you are dependable? So I think the first way it affected me was because I didn't do it myself. I thought that whenever someone came to talk to me, it was to get a solution. And that really actually affected a lot of my relationships because I didn't understand what actually was being required of me as a friend or as a partner. The other thing I would say is the way it affected me is quite funny, is that because I didn't understand my own feelings, whenever someone checked in with me, like my wife would say, how do you feel today? I'd say one of three things. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy. And those are all physical sensations and physical things, but never could really tap into, I feel sad, I feel guilty, I feel inadequate, I feel scared. The words wouldn't come because you don't have the understanding that the feeling is different from a physical kind of sensation. So I think there was a lot of unlearning and relearning that I'm still doing really till today. I have to bite my tongue and go like, no, now is not the time to give advice. Or now is not, she's asking how I feel, not whether I'm hungry.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that I'm also working on myself. Like it's as you said, it's an impulse. Like you come to me with a problem, I want to help you. Here's a solution. Here's try this, try that. And it takes a self-awareness to like, no, wait, maybe that's not what's needed here, right? And really slow yourself down and give them exactly what they're looking for actually. I guess on my end, like relationship wise, like I mentioned earlier about how I couldn't really find a lot of people to talk to about these kinds of things. That in turn dictated, not dictated, but it kind of affected like the kinds of people or relationships or friends that I had in my life. Like some people I thought I would be best friends for life with for forever, but then like there's this communication gap when it comes to talking about these things, and then the relationship kind of like drifts or something. On the other hand, you got people who I didn't think I'd be close to, but then they were really receptive or really good with like listening or talking about things in a way that I needed to hear. And then people I didn't think I'd be close with became very close friends. So there's two sides to this, but at the end of the day, I think it's still very important to be honest with it, because that's how you truly find your people. You're not surrounded by people that feel good, but maybe it's not exactly what you really need in your life. But yeah, okay. So Adrian, you did mention about that. Being as a boss, right? There's a turning point. You realize how you should be, expressing your emotions to your staff and everything. Were there other like turning points in your life, outside of work, that made you realize I have to talk about my emotions? I can't. It's not healthy to just keep it in all the time.
Yeah. I think for me, my wife and I, we had a unfortunate situation 2 years ago, where we had to go through a miscarriage, right? So I think that was a real like tough one, like emotionally, right? I think with miscarriage, you're losing a life that something that you hold dear to, and then you suddenly kind of just lose it. Right? I think the overwhelming amount of emotions and grief at that current point in time when it happened, when we first find out, it was so like overwhelming. I think in the very short span of time from the point that we found out to a little bit of a realization that maybe this feeling is one that we will never be able to suppress. I think we need to kind of embrace this. I mean, this grief that we're feeling, accepting it and trying to deal with it like together, instead of, trying to be strong for one another. I think being that pillar of support, for my wife, for each other is important. But I think the idea of being able to kind of share openly about how we feel without feeling like we need to be strong for one another, I think is equally important, right? So I think that was really one big turning point where we realized that, hey, like what the Netflix Korean drama show, right? The title says, it's okay not to be okay, right? That we don't need to kind of rush ourselves, right, to fix ourselves, right? If it takes time, it takes time. If we need to talk about it, we talk about it. If we need to cry about it, we cried about it, right? I think that has kind of changed a little bit of my perception of how I deal with feelings, or men about feelings as well, right? That sometimes we need mutual support, right? It's not just men providing the support for women, but sometimes we also need like our counterpart, right, to be that pillar of support for us. And I think it's completely okay to kind of do that. Yeah, so I think that was really one big episode in my life that kind of changed the perception of how I deal with my feelings. Yeah.
And Chirag, how about on your end?
Yeah, and I really like that line, it's okay not to be okay. We actually use it in some of our collateral when we talk to corporate clients, because to tell employees that, it's really okay not to be okay, go and seek help. For me, the turning point was, really, funnily, it was after we started Takehara, but it was last year, and kind of my marriage was at rock bottom. Shilpa started this venture. She was, going through her own kind of challenges as a startup founder. I was doing a job in the daytime and helping on the weekends and at night. But again, not like Adrian said, right, not being able to share each other's burden, talk to each other, and understand each other's feelings. It kind of all just, I felt it was all pent up. It was coming out in destructive ways. I started having like anger management issues, and it really struck me, because after being together for like 7 years and married 8, so we're like together almost 14, 15 years, she actually just turned around and said, like, look, if you don't do something about this, like, this cannot move forward. And it really struck me, like, what am I doing and what is this all for? And so I went to seek help, and I'm like, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't know what is it that's troubling me. So I went to see a therapist. It was scary at first. My therapist described it as therapy being a bit like surgery. Like, you open the person up and you're going to see a lot of stuff that you don't want to see, but she's like, I'm there with you all the way. And like, we'll make sure we open it at a pace that you're comfortable. And it was hard, but I think just because the relationship was so important to me, I had to address more fundamental kind of issues, being my childhood, my relationship with my folks, what I want out of life, why I'm suppressing my emotions. So I did all of that work, and it has improved my relationship leaps and bounds, and to the point that my wife then goes and thanks my therapist and go like, I don't know what magic you did, but this guy's a changed man, So yeah, there was that turning point, but I'm glad I kind of like wanted to do something about it, and in the process learned so much about my own kind of emotions, feelings, and mental health.
No, I relate with that, because I mean it started when you guys were starting up this new venture, right? And but my own personal journey was also based on work, because I joined Tech in Asia close to about 4 years ago now, and prior to that I worked in like comms, marketing, and so on. Like nothing wrong with those jobs, but like it wasn't for me. So when I joined Tech in Asia, I started writing, I started doing content, and I was having the time of my life. It's a dream job. It still is today. That hasn't faded. But about a year and a half into the Tech in Asia, I started feeling like really tired, really exhausted. This despite loving my job. So I was like, what's going on? And that's when I started to realize learn of things like burnout and imposter syndrome and these kinds of things. And then only then I started to really go and look more into it, figure it out for myself. Right. And I guess that's also a little bit like how the genesis for this podcast mini series that I just put out, like it's called 5-Track Mental Health in the Startup World. First episode just dropped last Monday. So it's just came from a case of like wanting to find out more about mental health and how to manage my own mental health. So in that I decided to talk to founders, talk to mental health and HR professionals, experts, learn not just their insights, but also their own from their personal stories, right? Of struggles, comebacks, and so on. Actually, episode 2 dropping next Monday features Sabrina of Calm Collective Asia. We saw her in the audience earlier. Shout out, Sabrina. Thank you so much for talking to me for that. And like talking to people like her, really just opened my mind, right? Let me see that there's so much more out there, that how deep this rabbit hole of mental health goes and what we can do for ourselves to better understand ourselves, right? And it's an ongoing process. I don't have all the answers. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I guess, yeah, that turning point a couple of years ago, where I realized that you can be doing what you love. You can wake up every day and be excited for what you're actually doing, but exhausted at the same time. And you can't just let that happen, because eventually you'll ruin everything. The thing that you love will become the thing you don't love anymore, right? So we gotta approach it. We gotta face it. Yeah. So okay, I guess like what we're doing now, right? Having these conversations and talking about experiences and so on. It's a way of normalizing conversations around talking about feelings for men and so on. But besides opportunities such as this, how are you guys like creating safe spaces, whether in your personal lives or in a public setting, for other men to share their emotions or to be more free with themselves, so to speak? Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I do have a little bit of a social media persona and community that I've built. Yeah, so I think that is where I kind of use that platform to kind of really show, the struggles. I mean, besides the jokes and the pranks and blah blah blah, right? I think I also use it as a platform to really show, even the daily struggles that I have, right? Even going through the entire miscarriage episode, I would say, quite open with sharing the struggles at the current point in time. And I think what was surprising was the fact that, first, I took comfort in people also reaching out to me after my sharing that, hey, I've been through a similar thing. I know it is tough. This is the way that I kind of dealt with it, right? And they gave me a lot of, like, I would say, tips, advice, or if not, they were just there to kind of share their own story with me. I think that comforted me a lot, to kind of know that I'm not alone. I think what came out of it was also the fact that, hey, a lot of men reached out to me and said, oh my God, thank you so much for sharing whatever you shared, because, I always thought that, as guys, we can't share some of these things, but seeing you do it kind of close the loop for me in some certain episodes in my life where I was just really struggling with a lot of these emotions, and being able to see you kind of absorb it all in and just treat it as really a part of you. I think that gave a lot of strength to a lot of men out there. So I feel like, taking a big step back, I think social media, right, could really be a good platform, right, for conversations like that to happen. Right. I think social media personas out there, have the ability to kind of shape and change some of this conversation. And I do hope that, I can use my own platform, my own brand to kind of advocate for some of these changes and some of these messages. Yeah.
Yeah, we all have our own like strengths, platforms, skill sets and everything, and we can always leverage those to further help these kinds of causes. Chirag, like, it's very obvious, right? Talk Your Heart Out is a platform in itself. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. So exactly. So in addition to obviously like connecting clients with psychologists and counselors as a counseling platform, we also like to do our bit for the Taiho community that we've kind of built. And really the goal we try to do, the goal we have is to increase people's understanding of, what mental health and well-being really means. And we do that by, attending panel discussions and podcasts like these, and developing a lot of content and writing a lot of articles around these topics. And the goal is to improve their vocabulary so that they can identify when it happens to them, what's happening to them. So, I believe as a society, we are only now understanding, what burnout is, what depression is, what anxiety is, what ADHD is, what it means to have relationship issues. And, my favorite is something my therapist taught me, what is an amygdala hijack? You go Google it. It's an amazing kind of like, there's a scientific basis to why you react the way you do and the way we feel and what happens. So I think what we try to do is, explain what these phenomenons or concepts are, how they affect us, and really to educate and increase awareness that people can't just quote unquote snap out of it. These are things we have to really understand before we can kind of deal with them. So that's what we try to do.
Okay. So I think it's about time for us to get into Q&A. We do have quite a number of questions, so thank you everyone for your questions. Please keep them coming if you have more. I guess like a first one, okay, a little bit more practical, and this is directed, Chirag, to you. As a guy, is it better to find a therapist who is a guy as well? You know, it's hard to find because there are way more female therapists.
The way we think about therapist fit is that it's extremely personal. Because it depends on what people are looking out for. On our platform, we see, females looking out for men because they feel like, they are for whatever reason more trustworthy, or they can share more openly without feeling judged, and vice versa. Men seeking out females because they feel like they'll be more understanding. People come with all sorts of kind of preconceived notions. But the most important is to understand who this therapist is and whether they kind of align with you and your goals that you want to achieve. And often, sometimes a therapist after 1 or 2 sessions can also tell you, maybe I'm not the best person to see you. Maybe you should go and see someone else who has a better fit. People have all sorts of inclinations to what will benefit them. Some people prefer younger people their age, they can relate to. Some people want older, like wiser people to come in and talk to them. So all I'd say to that is there's no rule to it. Really go find that right fit. Don't settle. Keep looking until you find someone that really resonates. And trust me, when you find that person, you will know that there's a connect. So it can be a process sometimes, and we try to tell our clients that as well. Like, if the first time it's not a fit, try again, because that fit is more important than in any other relationship that you'll have with any other kind of mental health professional or a kind of medical professional.
Yeah, no, that's something I also learned from like speaking to the people that I did for the podcast. Like Sabrina herself also mentioned, she likened finding a therapist to like online dating.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, it's never like the first, maybe not even the second or third, but you got to keep looking to find that perfect fit. Yeah. Okay. Next.
You can get lucky, but keep looking if you grow.
Yes, exactly. Okay, this one, okay, I guess we can kind of approach it because we all had issues with talking about our feelings when we were younger. Someone asks, how can we support men if they don't know how to talk about their feelings? It's a bit of a tricky one. Adrian, do you have any thoughts?
I feel like what Chirag mentioned, right? I think really expanding that vocabulary and your knowledge of all the different emotions that you're feeling is not just a happy, sad, emo, but I think really going deep into it. I think the more you know, the more you're able to kind of break down why are you feeling the way that you're feeling. I think then that will make you a little bit more confident with your own feelings and talking about those feelings. I feel like that is a really, really good point. I mean, this is something that we don't really quite learn in school. Right? I think it's really going through life that, having conversations that you slowly figure out, especially in this day and age where some of these topics becomes a little bit more mainstream, that kind of helps you discover like a little bit more, or even things like, Netflix shows like It's Okay Not to Be Okay. I feel like that kind of opens up a little bit of that conversation for other people. So I feel like, yeah, being able to kind of name our feelings, our emotions is something that really, really helps. Yeah.
Chirag, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think absolutely spot on. And I think the way to do that is like what you said, Winston, earlier, is to, instead of like telling people how they feel or telling them what they should do, like keep asking more questions. It's because it's not like they don't know what it feels to be scared or to be guilty or to be inadequate, but they don't, I think men in particular don't know these are feelings that are justified on their own, that you don't have to hide behind happy, sad, and drunk and thrilled or whatever, like you don't have to hide behind physical sensations. You can explore your emotions, but it needs a bit of patience, I think. And I only know this because my wife has expressed a lot of patience with me. Every time I'm be like, I feel down. Like down is such a general word. Like, why do you feel down? Do you feel defeated? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel scared? What is it that you are actually feeling? And that's what a therapist also helps you do. That's what you can help that's what you can help people do if you are not quick to like, oh, you are just feeling tired, go and sleep, or you're fine, just let's go for a drink, or you should just stop talking to that person and you'll be fine. So instead of jumping to solutions or telling people how they feel, like keep asking, that deeper question, and then the men will kind of get to the emotion that they're actually feeling.
Yeah, I think like when you tease it out and they say it for themselves, that's when the lesson really comes, right? Okay, Larry here wants to, okay, he congratulates us, it's good to be talking about these kinds of things. More CEOs, influencers, bosses talking about it. It's good, normalize conversations. But his question lies in, do you see any challenges in the future where such conversations might start to saturate social spaces, and what strategies can companies or in personal capacities can it take to make sure that saturation or like people don't get tired of talking about these kinds of things or hearing about these kinds of things rather? Adrian, as someone who is yourself a public personality, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, this is an interesting question. I think, we are at a point where, we are opening up such conversations, and I think, the concerns about it being a saturation, it is a real one. I think we don't want to, for example, just be talking about it just for the sake of doing it, right? I think, conversations like that should still feel genuine. It should still, like, it's coming from a personal, like, experience, right? So I think there has got to be different kinds of, like, safe spaces that we create, whether is it a personal one or like a public one, right? I think we need to know clearly what is the agenda, right, of such safe spaces, so that it does not just become like I just want to, check off the box, right? I'm a company, mental health for males or for men is important, so therefore I do it. I feel like it needs to come from the right place with the right intention, so that it does not, like what Larry mentioned, it becomes a saturation of people just feel like, we're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Then it'll be counter effective. Yeah, so I mean that is I would say a short answer to that question.
Okay. And
Mm.
Chirag, like, do you think saturation is an issue?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely not an issue, because like we can't talk about this enough. But I think it's the way you talk about it that's the issue. And I think the engagement must be genuine. So not everything needs to be a public forum, needs to be a big meeting, needs to be on World Mental Health Day. So for example, what we do is like what I try to do is like with my staff, I've just like have a monthly check-in with all of them, right? Talking about work and everything. But it's not like a mental health check-in. I don't try to like make it about their health and well-being. But at the start of that conversation, before I dive into like how's their work going, I just ask how's their life going, and so and how's their kind of like their workload and their mental health space is. So I think the key to ensuring that people don't get tired of talking about it is to make sure that when you talk about it, it's a genuine engagement. And like Adrian said, it's not like to either show somebody or to check something off. It can be very small, it can be one-on-one. Then it just becomes a part of normal life that, on a Monday morning, on a Friday, whenever you have your coffee, you're just checking in, asking, listening, and just being there for each other.
Okay. All right. We have one more question here. Congrats, Xiaoming, for becoming a dad. How do you think parenthood will affect you dealing with your emotions? And what do you think about transferring that knowledge of being vulnerable to your kid in the future?
Thank you. Finally, there's a good use for my dad jokes. Yeah, I mean, this is a question that I ask myself as well. I think, the best way that I can kind of really transfer some of this, learnings and knowledge and experiences that I have is really, I feel like it's really about setting the right example. Right? I think growing up, we all have strict and maybe, more emotionless like Asian dads as the example that we look up to when we grow up. I feel like, now that I have the opportunity to be a dad, right, then it is up to me to also, be openly expressive about how I feel, right, towards my son, and really getting him to be comfortable with, seeing me share my feelings about everything in life, whether it's with him, with the family, or with my work. And then hopefully, when he grows up, he's able to kind of just, I mean, it becomes very normal for him, right? It's not something that I have to teach him to talk about your emotions. Right? I've been exposed to this growing up, so it becomes something that's very natural. So I feel like, I mean, I hope that I'll be able to do that for my kid, and hopefully he'll be able to take a little bit of that experiences that I have and help him in sculpting his own, personality moving forward and being able to embrace his own emotions. Yeah.
Okay. I guess one last question. We're running out of time. From the opposite sex, actually, to all three speakers, any tips for the females in this session that we can start a I feel bro conversation, or otherwise help on top of providing a listening ear for the men in their lives?
Actually, something I heard just this morning on a CNA podcast, one of my is someone said, help them get help. And I really like that phrasing, because sometimes you're right, listening ear is not enough. Sometimes you're not the right person they should be talking to about that specific issue, if it's workplace and you're not there and you don't understand. So, but you can always guide people to say, maybe you should X, just talk to your boss. Maybe you should talk to your colleague who I know you're very close to. So when you're listening to them, you will also get ideas on what help they require. Maybe you should talk to a therapist. Maybe you should talk to a friend. Maybe you should talk to your parents, your brother. So, but if you listen well, maybe if you're not able to help, even as a listening ear, then try to identify who do you think can help them. That can be sometimes quite powerful in many ways, because they also then understand that you're not just trying to advise them, you're actually trying to genuinely point them in the right direction, and they will be more motivated to then go and get help.
Adrian, on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Chirag actually. Yeah, I mean that is what I feel would be important. I mean, listening here is good, but I think we all know that we are all not professional therapists, right? And that if there's more to be done to help men, then it's like what Chirag mentioned, is pointing them towards the right direction and assuring them that it is okay, right? It's okay to seek help, right? It's not that you're weak, right? It's just that maybe you need somebody to help connect the dots a little bit better, right? And I might not be the best person to do that, other than listening to some of these dots that you might need to connect. Yeah, so I feel like that would be a good advice or a direction that females in the session can kind of take. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with that, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Thank you so much again for all the questions. We couldn't get to all of them, but we got to hopefully most of them, and hopefully the ones that help the most people. Thank you again so much, Adrian, Chirag, for joining me and talking about this important topic. Before we sign off, I want each of you to give me a one-liner, a parting message to the men in the audience. Adrian?
Oh, okay. I would say, yeah, I mean, embrace your emotions, your feelings. That they are not irrelevant, right? You just need to learn how to kind of dissect it and understand it, embrace it a little bit better. Yeah.
Chirag?
Yeah, I'll say it takes courage, and it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help and to say, I don't have everything under control.
On my end, I would say just talk about it more. Be more open about it. Don't shy away. Don't just hold it in, because that's not going to help anybody, least of all yourselves. All right. All right. So that's about all the time we have. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. If this has helped even just one of you to, figure out yourself a little bit more, figure out the men in your life a little bit more, I'll be very happy. All right. Thank you again, Adrian and Chirag, and to everybody.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.